Hey guys, how's it going? It's Saturday and we got another video for you guys. I know I said I would be doing the laybox video for my bearded dragon as my next video, but I wanted to do this video first. I felt like it was important enough, and I just keep seeing a lot of it, so I just really wanted to talk about it. But before we get into the discussion, make sure you check that lower right hand corner, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you're notified when more updates are posted. But anyway guys, today we are going to talk about enclosure size for Ackie monitors. I see a lot of people who are very comfortable in the hobby in general, very comfortable with putting them in enclosures that are like 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, and to me that is just incredibly inaccurate. That's probably my biggest gripe with current Ackie husbandry today in terms of the standards. And I want to just talk about that today, talk about reasons why that's not big enough. I know people, aren't always thinking like me and don't always want to go super large or whatever for certain reptiles and stuff, whether it be money or whatever. But a 4 by 2 by 2 feet enclosure it's not big enough. And specifically, the height is the problem in that case. But we're going to talk about that today. And I'll kind of use my enclosure that I have for the babies in the back there as an example of like what a 4 by 2 by 2 would look like. That's 4 by 2 by 3, so it's roughly the same. But even for babies, like that 4 by 2 by 2 isn't enough. And we'll talk about that in more depth in the video. So let's get to it. We'll talk about this all, and hopefully I can convince you that they need a bigger enclosure size. So let's go, guys. So here we have the 4 by 2 by 3 foot enclosure I have for the newborn Ackie babies. They're just waking up and going a little crazy right now, getting some morning basking in. But basically, we'll use this as a comparison for the 4 by 2 by 2 foot enclosure, and we'll start by talking about the height. Now, the height is the biggest problem with the 4 by 2 by 2 foot enclosure build, and that's basically because there's just not enough space to do everything correctly. Even at the minimum, it's pretty hard to pull off, and at minimum, you probably want 12 inches of substrate. Now, you're going to want more. Minimum really isn't minimum to me, but I can see an argument for maybe 12 inches, especially if you have a male. Females, like my Dell over here, when they have eggs and they're trying to lay them, they will dig down a lot deeper than normal. And I've even seen both my male and female dig deeper than 12 inches, but when she laid her eggs, she was almost at 20 inches down. My adult enclosures go down about 2 feet. So, you want to probably give 2 feet of just substrate, to be real. I'm not going to hold everybody to that standard, but I think that's really what they should be having. But you're probably going to want to give at least 1.5 feet in my mind. But I know some people go as low as 1 foot. But let's say you have 1 foot, right? And you're doing a 4 by 2 by 2 foot enclosure. That gives you about 1 foot of airspace, right? Well, number one, you got to remember that while they're not arboreal, they like to climb. They like to use some airspace, so you want to give them some airspace to climb, but then you're also going to have your bulbs, right? And yeah, you could hang them on top or put them on some sort of grate, like, that enclosure down there. You could put them on top of something like that, right? That's plausible. You don't want to give that much ventilation for an Ackie enclosure. Air humidity isn't super important, but I wouldn't keep it open top. But anyway, I really like the design of hanging them inside the enclosure. And you don't want them to be able to jump and touch them and mess with them. And I also really change a lot of these lights. Sometimes on the season, like right now, I have a 60 watt in there. Let's not use this for a comparison since this is newer, but right now I have two 80 watts in here, and Asus's, which is kind of closer to the heat vent or whatever you want to call it, has an 80 and a 60. But I transition from 30 to 80 watts based on the season in here and stuff like that. So, and I also, mess with dropping them in more and whatever. So really, you want some airspace to mess with your lights. But I guess you could say as an argument, you could put them potentially on top of a grate like that. I don't know what enclosure design would not have them built into the enclosure, like drooping in like that, as a 4 by 2 by 2 foot enclosure. But, I guess technically you could do that, but really a foot of height, and you don't want them to sort of get up to the grates and climb on it. It's just not enough, especially for climbing. Like, let's look over here. And you got to remember, you're going to have UVB hopefully in there, right? Like the UVB I have in both my enclosures. And they're really not, I mean, I guess you could go with a lower percentage for D3, but they're really not supposed to get within, like, closer to a foot to 15 inches of the UVB bulbs. And I really think that's at most percentages anyway. Sorry, it's a little dirty. I actually got to clean these guys. It's been way too long since I've cleaned this plexiglass. But anyway, that was a tangent, wasn't it? You guys love my tangents. But yeah, so basically, it's just, it really doesn't add up. You know, if you got to stay away from the UVB 12 to 15 inches usually, even at lower percentages, let's say you can go closer, I'm not sure if you can, but let's say you can, you're going to have, you know, this wood here, right? This wood is going to go up some vertical space. You want some climbing in for your Ackies. That's going to take up space, and that's probably going to put it way closer, like within probably like 5 inches of the UVB bulb or 5 inches of those bulbs, and that might get too hot. So it's not plausible in my mind. There's too many variables, too many things you need to accurately take care of an Ackie to put them in 2 feet of height. It's just, people usually compensate by not putting enough substrate in, and that's a real problem because number one, if you have a female, they need a lot of substrate in case they're going to lay their eggs, and you don't want them to get egg bound. And in general, they really, you know, that's where the humidity counts. And I think a lot of people don't understand this. They think the whole enclosure needs to be wet and damp and moist. That's not what they typically experience in the wild. They get their humidity, usually at night, by burrowing into the soil, into the substrate. And they dig deep down until it's kind of damp. And that's what helps with their sheds and stuff. And they can't really do that in an enclosure with only 6 inches of substrate. So that's really important that you get that substrate depth correctly. But that's really my main argument about a 4 by 2 foot by 2 foot enclosure is the height. I also don't think the width and the length are enough. But I could understand how one could argue that 4 foot in length or 2 feet in width is enough if they're really not, you know, too caring about what they put their Ackie in, which is unfortunate, but I could see that, but I really don't think it's enough. My width is actually 2.5 to 3 foot long, so that's not really as big of a problem I have, although I do think the width for these enclosures could be bigger if I was to build it more optimally. So, you know, take that as you will, but in terms of length, you know, these guys are very active, and they really use a lot of space. You know, they could be put in a 4 by 2 foot by 3 foot enclosure permanently, I guess. I mean, it's not the end of the world. They have all their basic necessities, I guess. But in terms of letting them really do their thing and do what Ackies do and use the space, you really want much more in length at least. And their width should really be about 2 Ackies long, to be honest. So really, you know, those are more, I guess you could classify that as a preference in my mind, not really a necessity, but I really do think it's sort of a necessity in terms of giving them enough space to exercise and, you know, do what they need to do to, you know, live fulfilling lives. So, you know, take that as you will. I think it's super important. I don't know why someone would not want to put their animals or their reptiles in the best possible situation they could put them in. I had someone comment before that they wouldn't want to see, and not to really call this person out, I'm not trying to do that, I know I kind of am, but they wouldn't want to put like a 2 foot lizard in a 6 foot lizard's enclosure, and I think they were referencing, you know, me talking in a previous video about wanting to see Ackies sort of in a really big enclosure, like my Tegu's enclosure. And honestly, if you'd really ask me, and I think I commented this back, I really think that an Ackie would utilize that enclosure pretty much the same amount as my Tegu. Now, I do think my Tegu, if, you know, I could optimally do it correctly, deserves more than the 8 by 4 foot by 4 foot enclosure he is in currently. And I do give him free roam time so he can, you know, stretch out a little bit beyond that enclosure. But yeah, you know, I really do think Ackies would utilize that enclosure size if you put them in it. So I really don't, I mean, I'm not going to say everybody should go ahead and put their Ackies in an 8 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot enclosure, but I'm just saying, you know, they really could utilize a lot of space. So really don't skimp on that, guys. I really do think 2 feet in height is just the real main problem I have. That's just way too condensed. It's just not going to meet all their needs. And, you know, I'm not going to say that you definitely need more than 4 foot in length or 2 foot in width, but I do think you need it. And I know I pretty much just contradicted myself right there, but I think you guys get what I mean. My main thing is just give these guys credit. You know, a lot of people see them as small monitors and don't really understand them and just think it's cool and don't really want to go, you know, all out on them like you would, like a Tegu or something. And these guys, if you give them space, they're very entertaining. It's worth it. But this video, I just wanted to make because it's just really important. A lot of people don't give them credit in terms of the size they need and stuff like that, and it's just really pains me to see people putting them in smaller enclosures and enclosures that aren't going to meet their needs. So I just thought I needed to do a sort of PSA about this and sort of talk about this as a problem and try to encourage you to go ahead and build a bigger enclosure. And guys, remember, and I'll plug this in the description, I have detailed plans for these big adult enclosures I have that I built in a document, so I will put that below. It's just in a Google document, and it's as detailed as I can make it. So if you want to go ahead and build one of these, go ahead. I am not handy, so you don't need to be handy to achieve this, and it's not as costly as it would if you were to buy a commercial one. Do it right, probably $400 to $500, and that would probably be double as a commercial enclosure. But anyway, guys, that's it. I hope this video was informative to you guys. I know it's not as appealing to a wider audience or anything, but I think it needed to be said. So hopefully you guys agree with me, and hopefully this convinces some people to go bigger than smaller for these guys. So anyway, I will talk to you guys tomorrow during the live stream. So see you guys then. Remember, subscribe in the lower right hand corner. See you guys.